Hello, my name is Peter van der Pavert. I'll be telling you about ESTeam Translator 5.2, the software you'll be using to translate trademarks. Here I have a little overview of the 3 steps that you'll need to go through before you can actually get any work done, which is installation of the software. This you'll do on the basis of the information provided by our help desk. Then using the software, that's what I'm going to be telling you now. And the 3rd step is translating the trademarks, for which there's a separate course, presumably given by our demand management section. But as I said, I'll be focusing on using the software. So I will launch the software here. You'll see a number of messages telling you what it's doing, and it will immediately open the first trademark. But before we do that, we're going to go back to the list of trademarks. Now, everything I'm going to be telling you, or almost everything, is also in the user manual called Trademark Translation Software User Manual for External Translators, which you should be getting as part of the package. Now, the manual starts off with a What's New section, which is basically only interesting to freelancers that have worked for us before. You can very quickly get an overview of the changes we've made. There are some quite important ones, but I won't go into them here. I invite you to read this yourself. What I will explain for the newcomers are some basic concepts. Now, the most important thing you need to know about the trademarks is the fact that they consist of 4 different elements, quite different elements. The first one, possibly the most important ones in terms of volume, is the list of goods and services and the class to which these goods and services belong. You'll see a little bit more about the class later on. The second element is the disclaimer. This indicates what the trademark does not cover. Then you might have a list of colors, and you might also have a description of the graphic representation of the trademark, which we normally call logo. The 3 last elements together are sometimes abbreviated as DCL, disclaimer, color, logo. You will see in every trademark, you will see at least one of these items. You might see all 4. It depends. The rest of this description of basic concepts, I invite you to read. It's interesting to know, but it's not necessary for me to explain that right now. So on to the software itself. So to launch the software, double click on the icon, fill in your username. You'll get a number of messages telling you what the software is doing. The software will immediately open to the first trademark to be translated, but I want to start at the list of trademarks. The list of trademarks contains quite a lot of information that you might find interesting, and a number of features. Let's start with the features. The basic feature in the list is the way you can sort the trademarks to be translated. All the trademarks to be translated are in the left column. Once they're finished, you can also see them in the right column. The center column is reserved for all kinds of information. So to sort the left column, you can either sort them by size, ascending or descending. This is when you want to work from, maybe you want to start with the largest first, but if you sort only by size, it will do so irrespective of the language combination. So in this case, I would be getting a mixture. That might not be your ideal situation, so you could sort by language, pair, and size simultaneously, in which case I will get if I do a descending, I'll get the biggest Danish trademark first, followed by smaller ones. The way to see this is when I run through the list, you can see that these values here change. This is the size of the trademark. So here I have 61 words and 500 plus characters. Now I have 49 words, etc. Now it'll change. Now I've changed language, so it pops back up to 320 words for this German to Dutch trademark. You can also simply sort by language pair, so that's what it then does basically is language pair and number. It'll use the trademark number. Sorting by deadline doesn't have any effect because normally the deadline is the same for the whole batch, but you can do it if you like. So I will go back to my default is language pair. I don't mind so much the size, and if I double click on the trademark, it will open the first one. I'm not going to do it just yet because I want to point out this information here in the center column. So I've selected this trademark. On selecting, it becomes blue, and I get the information here about that trademark. So I know the application number, I know how big it is, we've already seen that. I have the language combination, I have a version number. Here in the nationality of the applicant there's nothing, but when there is, it might be relevant because sometimes you'll see that the applicant is, say, American, in which case you have to watch out for the meaning of certain words, like for example, pants means something different in British English than it means in American English. Comments are usually used for internal comments within the trademark office in Alicante, so for the most part you can ignore them, but once in a while they'll contain a comment that's relevant to the translator. And of course you have your deadline. This part, this graphic part here, contains information that again can be interesting. It tells you the types of processing, and if you hover with your cursor on this field here, then it will also call up the explanation. So you'll see, for example, that in black you'll have repeated sentences. In this case you have none. Here all you have are these blue types, which are segment processing. I'll go into each of the most important of these later on in the course. The big differences are the ones that you should not touch and cannot touch, and the ones that you can translate and revise. And we'll see that a little bit later. As I said, you can select the information on the trademarks. I'm now scrolling down through the list using the arrows. It will show you the information on each of the trademarks, but you can also right click in this area here and ask for the statistics for all, and what that does is tell me my whole batch. And in this case my whole batch consists of 15,600 plus words and almost a little bit more than 100,000 characters, so quite a lot to do. One last thing, you will have noticed that some of these are red. The red ones are trademarks that I've already done. So let's see if I can find it quickly. Yes, that would be this one. So this is something I had already opened it. I've already translated it. I've indicated that I'm finished translating. It moves to the right side, this list here, but it also remains here in red. You will also see once in a while something in white, but I'll explain that later. So much for the list of trademarks. Let's start working on one. So I say OK, and it takes me here. We are now on the Translation tab, which is where you'll do most of your work. The Translation tab has a number of different areas. The most important ones are this main area, this main working area, where you'll see your source text and the target text, in this case the pre-translation that you have to edit. Then we'll talk about the main translation area quite a bit a little later on. Then you have the so-called reference window, which displays information from the translation memory, and then here you have a number of buttons, which navigational buttons and action buttons to do things. Now, in a general sense, what you will be doing is you will open a trademark, look at the source text, have a look at the pre-translation, edit it, if necessary, maybe delete it all and start again. But the general process will be you'll be going one by one through each of these segments. And I'm going to simulate that now, but without actually making any changes, just to make it quicker. So instead of actually, normally what I would say is, okay, I've edited here something, it doesn't really matter what, and then I accept the translation. In this case, it'll tell me errors exist. I'm going to continue anyway. We'll look about the errors in a minute. These are spelling errors. You'll see that there are all kinds of different colors. That too will be explained in a minute. So I'm going to accept the translation. Okay, now this is a very big trademark, so it would take a long time for me to go through it this way. I just want to show you how the accept work, how the clear works. If you have a pre-translation that's totally useless, you can clear it and create your own. And if you then accept, it'll tell you you have to type in a translation. It doesn't really matter what. And accept it. And you can also, if you're working in a very long segment and you've made a lot of changes, you can save it now. This is in the case you need to interrupt. Say I need to interrupt and go do something, I can save it now. Now, what we've been looking at now are goods and services. If in this specific instance I don't actually have a logo, but were I to have a logo, I could press on this, which would be a description of the graphical representation. I could press on this button to see the logo. This button does two very different things. It can take you to a separate tab with a logo. In this case, we don't have one. If it doesn't have one, it should take you to the database, the OHIM database containing the trademark in question. And if there were a logo, as you can see, there is none, it would be displayed here. So back to this area. So those are the main functions. Here, to navigate within the trademark, you can use these arrows here to go ahead and back. You can also go all the way, say, back to the beginning or to any segment you want by right-clicking and saying get here. You'll see that again the color has changed. This also will be explained. As I indicated in the introduction, you have a number of different types of pre-processing. I'll explain all of these colors here, but before I even go into that, you need to realize that there's two main types of pre-processing. You have pre-processing at segment level or sentence level. In the interface, they consistently talk about sentences. We often call these segments. Let me just show you an example. Yes, okay. This is a pre-processing at sentence level. What that means is the pre-translation engine looks at the sentence as a whole and tries to find the best possible match. In this case, it's found an 82% match. So it's found something that is 82% similar. It found something in the translation memory that's 82% similar to what you need to translate now. In this case, there's one little word missing. There is also something called subsegment processing. That's at lower level, so that we're talking about either individual words or very short strings of words like noun phrases. So if we look down one here, this is in fact subsegment processing. What it does is it looks at, it hasn't found anything at the sentence level, so it looks at the lower level word by word, and in this case, in fact, it hasn't found anything either. But you'll see instances in which some of these words will be translated and others will not. So these are the two. Here you go. Here's one where you have some words are translated. These strings have been translated. So verwalting, bureauarbeid have been translated here. Indexering has not. So you can see that the green indicates it's been translated. The red indicates that it's not been translated at all. That's processing at subsegment level. So now I want to talk a little bit about the type of pre-processing. So as I mentioned in the introduction, you have here all the different colors will tell you the relative volumes, the number of sentences pre-processed in a certain way. You have repeated sentences and NT sentences or segments. These things are called sentences or segments alternately. Both of those are sentences that you won't be able to edit. What they look like, the repeated sentences, you can't open them, but you can't identify them other than that. The NT sentences are identified by an NT before and after it. Now, if you see, I'll navigate through the trademark, you'll see that it immediately jumps over the NTs, so you can't open them at all. It will also jump over any repeated sentences. These are sentences that occur exactly in the same way within a batch or within a number of batches within a certain time frame. The idea is that somebody only needs to translate that once, and then it will be retranslated automatically later. So those are the two types of sentences that you need not worry about at all. There's a third type that, as a translator, you don't have to worry about. That's the full match. You don't see any here, and in fact you won't see them in the translation tab either, because again it will jump over the full match. The full match is something that was found in the translation memory with 100% match score. About the match scores, you can see them here. We're going to go now to have a look at the fuzzy match, which are one of the two most common things that you'll be seeing as a translator. So the fuzzy match is indicated by a yellow background, and you can see also the score. In this case, it was pre-translated 54%, which means that 54% of this source text was found in the memory. It has only a very vague correspondence to the actual quality of the translation. In some cases you need to retranslate it completely. Hopefully it will at least save you some typing, and of course it should have a number of elements that are correct, but as you'll see later on with the segment processing, this can really, it depends. You'll have to have a look at that yourself. Now so we have the fuzzy match with the yellow background. We have, which is important to you, we have the segment processed segments with a blue background. We'll see if we can quickly find one. Here you go. Here's one with a blue background. What this means is that the sentence was not, there was no match on sentence level, so instead it looks at the sentence word by word. And in this case, in fact, it has only found one little string, which was this one here, Bureau Arbeiten, and that was translated by a full match at subsegment level into administratieve diensten. All of these other ones were not translated, so there is no one-on-one translation for the word organisation in the memory. This means basically that I can, to do my translation, I can get rid of all of that and then start typing. All of this myself. I can maintain this one, and by the way, it becomes bold because I've selected it here. You need not worry about this sort of bold and highlighting and things like that. It won't affect the quality of the translation. So say I've done this one, I can go to the next one. Here in the fuzzy match you see that there's also some highlighting, and this is to indicate the difference between what was in the memory and what's in the fuzzy match. There's one more. Yes, this one. This is a segment processing where the score is 0%. So you see that the background is purplish, lila. This is to indicate that there is no match whatsoever. So in fact, in this case, you might as well just clear the segment and start from scratch. There are two more background colors that I want to mention. One of them is the white. When you finish translating a segment and you accept it, you can see that the background will turn white. This is to indicate that it has been manually translated. That's also indicated here. I'm going to move this to revision. When a trademark with white segments is revised by the reviser, which is something that we do in the center, but you can also do internally within your agency, it turns pink. So that's it for the pre-translations. I had already mentioned quite quickly the logos, what happens when you hit the logo button. I have a number of other features that I want to go through very quickly. One of them is find and replace. Now, find and replace, how it works depends on where you are. If you hit Control F, it'll call up the find dialog box. But in this case, I'm in the source text, so I need to go to the target text to be able to find what it is that I was looking for. So how it works depends on where you are. Also, it's not only the find, it also allows replace, but only within the target text, because you're never allowed to make any changes in the source text. So on with the spelling checker. The spell checker has two main ways of working. One is called the editing mode, which is the mode that you use while you're working, while you're translating. And as you can see here on the screen, it resembles the way it works in Microsoft Word. The other mode is called batch mode, and you use that on all the trademarks in one go. I'll show that later. In the editing mode, you have the squiggly red lines to indicate an error. It's interactive, so you have the possibility to correct, and your corrections will be taken into account. You have, if you select the word, you have to select the word, otherwise it won't work. You will have, in some cases, suggestions for corrections. So in this case, it made the correct suggestion. You will also have, so you right-click. You can also add it to the dictionary if it is in fact correct, or you can launch the spelling dialog, which allows you to go through the trademark error by error. So there are different ways where you can use it. The normal situation is, I think, using it while you work. Now in this case, for example, if I now accept the translation, it will just continue. That's because I've turned off the show warning if errors exist. This is one of the options that you can use. Now let's see, I've turned it on again, and I think I need to save the settings. I'll save them. Let's see what happens now. Aha. So if you have the show warnings option on, it will stop you every time you try to accept a sentence that contains spelling errors. So in this case, I don't want to accept it. I'm indeed happy that it warned me. I'm going to correct it. I will accept it, and it'll be fine. If you accept the last segment in a trademark and there are still spelling errors in the trademark, you will get this warning: all units translated but contain spelling errors. And you can then say click spell errors to go to the ones that are in there. So I've corrected this one. I'll accept it. No, I'll go to the next one. In fact, in this case, to go to the next one, the easiest way is to use F7. So I hit F7. It immediately identifies the next possible error. But in this case, I actually add this to a dictionary because they're correct. Aha, these are not correct because I didn't translate it at all, etc. So you'll see that once in a while you'll get this sort of remnant. You can just ignore that. It will not have any effect on your work. Those are the most important parts of the interactive spell check. In this menu, you can see next takes you to the next one. Just ignoring basically is the same as ignore this instance. You can ignore all the instances of this word, but that's only in this trademark. You can add to dictionary, and if there are suggestions, you can change all, just as in Microsoft Word. The only difference with Microsoft Word in this case is that you cannot edit in this window. This window helps you identify errors and make certain selections, but it doesn't do everything that Microsoft Word does. Now, this was the spell checker in editing mode, but you also have the batch mode. So the batch spell check, the spell check on all the trademarks, is most useful for the trademarks, of course, that you've already finished. The ones that you haven't done yet will contain quite a lot of pre-translations, which is source text, which is not very useful. Let's just have a look at anyway. So I'm going to right-click here somewhere in the area, select spell check all trademarks. This takes a little while, and it will spell check everything here, both the trademarks still to be done and the trademarks to be done, but we'll focus on the ones that have been done. And you will see that I missed a few errors. I know because I already checked this out. But some of them won't be real errors. We'll see in a minute. So, for example, this one here, all the ones in white contain words that are not recognized by the spell checker. So let's see if we can find that one. So I'm going to do a search in CTMs by name. Name is actually a misnomer. What it actually means is number. So I'm going to fill in the number and to try to locate it. It's a little bit quicker than locating it manually. And there it is. Double click to open it. And indeed it contains something that is flagged as an error. And it wasn't actually an error, I can see now. So what I need to do is select it and add it to the dictionary. And then accept the translation, and it's finished. Now I would like to show you the expand macro. The expand macro is meant as a visual aid when you have segments, trademarks, that are very, very long, are so long, in fact, some of them are so long that you can't see all of the elements on the screen. And this can be, even after you resize, it might still be quite difficult to see everything, and it's also difficult to follow what you've been doing. So when this occurs, what you can do is use the expand macro, which is over here. It takes, if it's correctly configured, it takes the contents of the trademark and puts it in a Word document. Okay, let's just ignore this. And once you have it in the Word document, you need to use the macro and press expand here. And what that does is basically it just takes the content of the trademark and splits it into separate lines using the comma. Now this, of course, the comma is used in different languages in different ways, so it will never be a one-on-one correspondence, but it can be quite useful because many of these, you see that this one is really extremely long. This is, let me see now, this seems to be several pages long. One segment, yeah, here it stops. So this is all one segment, apparently. So to be able to translate this properly, it's quite daunting. It's quite difficult to keep track of where you are. So what you could consider doing is you use the expand macro to expand it to Word, and then you do your translation here. And when you're finished, you collapse it again. So say in this case I'm just going to do a few lines. So in this case I would do this is again not a very good translation, it doesn't matter, because the point is just to show you how it works. So I've done my translation, then I collapse everything again, and then I just select everything in this box, and I cut and paste it manually into the correct spot here in the trademark. And you can see this is still not okay because I haven't translated everything, but the point was to show you how the expand macro works. So now let's have a look at customizing the interface. The customization is all under settings, or almost all of them are under settings. You can change the colors of the interface if you like. You have to watch out when you change colors. You have to watch out that you don't create conflicts between the default colors and the newly chosen colors in such a way that you can't actually see anything. For example, if I were to choose for this to be a red background, it would be very difficult for me to see the red highlighting. You can change the translation layout. You can turn it into horizontal, so have the source text on top and then the target text. Personally, I prefer left to right. You can change the font. I have already done so. I've turned it into Arial. The default is something else. You can change the font size. Again, I've already done that because I prefer to have a larger size. The print browser is something that hopefully will have been done during installation. Concordancer settings, you don't have to. Again, something for installation. Number of concordancer hits is default 5. That for most purposes that's okay. You can increase it if you feel it's not enough, but we haven't dealt with the concordancer yet, so we'll look at that later on. Same with the autosave step. That's also in relationship to the concordancer. We've already dealt with the enable spell check, and anytime you make any changes, it's a good idea to save the settings. And if you find you don't like them after all, you can also go back to the default or go back to the last settings. Those are the main options from the menu. You can also resize the bottom screen by dragging this gray bar, or you can use the arrows to completely get rid of it. Now, this course is in principle only about the software, but there's one element that's very closely linked to translation that I want to mention here, which is the reference material. There are 3 different ways to access important reference material. The first one is up in the header you have a class number. If you double click on it, you will get the NIST class headings, which are it's a very important piece of reference material. They're basically mandatory translations for certain strings. These will be displayed, and this will help you with context. So it'll not only help you in the case that you have an actual 100% match between a word here and the NIST class headings, but it'll also help you realize, for example, if this word is chips, you'll know whether it's a potato chip or a computer chip, because clicking on this will tell you what's in that class. So these are, for example, class 1 is chemical products. The next way is to select a word and to search in the concordancer, the NIST concordancer, or both. Now, my concordancer is empty, so that's because I'm using an experimental version, so I can't show you any results, but I hoped to be able to find one. Let me see if I can find one in the NIST concordancer. This word presumably will be in the NIST concordancer. Yes. So here I looked for conserveringsmittel, and it occurs in the NIST concordancer, and the NIST concordancer contains the NIST alphabetical list, which is not 100%, not all of it is mandatory, but it is a very good reference document. Now, the NIST concordancer contains a number of different sources, information from a number of different sources, and You can see that in this field here. It's called updated by, but we needed to use this field because we didn't have anything else. But I've included the information on the different sources here. So this is the NIST 9th edition. You also have other databases: Trilateral, Bilateral, OHIM, and Locarno. All of these have been approved by the Trademark Office in Alicante, or the OHIM. Create a fake entry. I'm going to accept it. As soon as I accept it, it goes to the concordancer. So there you go. I've just created it. This is my date. This is my identifier. This is created for the purpose of reference, so that I can immediately see what I did, and in fact, if you have a shared concordancer, others can see it as well. But in this case, of course, I created one that I didn't want to create. It's not a good one, so I'm going to delete it again. When I created it, it made use of the fact that I have my settings here on my autosave step is 1. That means that every time I accept a translation, that translation also goes to the concordancer. If I were to set this to 5, it would only do that after I had okayed 5 translations. The only reason to change that setting, in fact, is if it's very, very slow. If you find that the concordancer is very slow to react, you might want to increase the number in the autosave step, but otherwise it's better to leave it at 1, because basically it's a fail-safe mechanism. It saves your translation even if you have then problems with, say, your computer or the interface. You will be able to find quite a lot of your work back in the concordancer. And that's it for the translation software for the moment. There are some tips on troubleshooting and miscellaneous tips and some useful keyboard shortcuts in the manual, but I don't think it's necessary to go into that here. I suggest that you read them yourself. Okay, thanks for your attention and good luck.